The heptapod slammed a powerful tentacle across Sergeant John Reaper Scora's face, splattering bright red blood across the cold metal floor of the alien interrogation chamber, foolishly assuming their advanced, mind-probing technology could force the truth out of him. Sergeant Scora remained silent, hiding a smirk, knowing the heptapod's arrogant reliance on their hive mind and technology would be their downfall in this war. These aliens had no idea humans could lie. The heptapods had been slowly conquering Earth's colonies for a decade, slaughtering millions with their superior weapons and ships. Earth's defenses were crumbling. Sergeant Scora and his team had been deployed to Xandar Prime for a desperate final mission to destroy a critical heptapod industrial complex. But the heptapods had anticipated the attack. Sergeant Scora fought bravely, killing dozens of heptapods, but was eventually overwhelmed and captured. Now, strapped into the interrogation machine, the secrets he held in his mind were the only thing preventing the heptapods from launching an overwhelming final assault on Earth itself. Billions would die if he cracked, but he wouldn't, because he could lie. Sergeant Scora spat out a mouthful of blood, his split lip already swelling. The coppery taste lingered on his tongue as he stared defiantly at the heptapod interrogator. Its tentacles twitched with frustration, the mind probe helmet still clamped tightly over Scora's skull. "The human's mind is difficult to penetrate," the interrogator hissed to its superior. "His thoughts are chaotic, contradictory. I cannot discern truth from falsehood." Scora seized the opportunity, knowing he had to sell the lie convincingly. "That's because you heptapod bastards don't know what you're up against. You think you're winning this war? We've got bases hidden on a dozen planets, weapons you can't even imagine. And we see everything you do, every ship you launch, every transmission you send. Our spy satellites are watching, always watching." He trailed off ominously, letting the heptapod's imaginations fill in the gaps. The interrogator exchanged an uncertain look with its superior, who snarled in response. "Impossible. Our fleets have encountered no such resistance, detected no hidden human bases. You lie." Scora laughed, ignoring the pain in his ribs. "Of course you haven't detected them. Our stealth tech is decades ahead of yours, but they're out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. And when they do—" The superior heptapod slammed its tentacles against the control panel in anger, causing sparks to fly. It turned to the interrogator, eyes narrowed. "Increase the power to the mind probe. I want the truth extracted from this human's primitive brain, no matter the cost." The interrogator hesitated. "But, Commander, any higher and we risk permanent damage. We may lose the information entirely." "I don't care," the commander roared. "I will not be made a fool of by this lowly creature. Do it." As the interrogator reluctantly adjusted the settings, Scora braced himself for the coming onslaught. But before the mind probe could fire up again, the door to the chamber burst open, revealing a heptapod adorned in ornate armor, flanked by 2 guards. The commander spun around, eyes widening in recognition and fear. "Lord Xalox, I did not expect—" "Silence!" Xalox snapped, striding forward to loom over Scora. "I have been monitoring your progress with great disappointment, Commander. You have allowed this human to fill your head with lies and fantasies instead of extracting the information we need." The commander quailed under Xalox's withering glare. "Forgive me, Lord Xalox. The human's mind is unusually resistant to the probe. I thought that perhaps, with more power—" "Well, you thought wrong," Xalox said coldly. It turned its attention to Scora, studying him with calculating red eyes. "This human is not like the others. It has been trained to resist our methods. Fortunately, I have other ways of breaking its will." Xalox gestured to the guards, who stepped forward and began unfastening Scora from the interrogation chair. Scora felt a flicker of fear as he was dragged roughly to his feet, but he kept his expression neutral, determined not to show weakness. As the guards hauled him from the room, Xalox leaned in close, its fetid breath hot against Scora's ear. "We have much to discuss, human. By the time I am finished with you, you will beg to tell me everything you know, and a great deal that you don't." The guards dragged me down a long corridor, my boots scraping against the metal grating with each step. I tried to keep track of the turns, but the pain in my skull made it hard to focus. Left, right, left again. Or was it right? It didn't matter. There would be no escape from whatever fresh hell Xalox had planned. We reached a heavy blast door, which slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. The chamber beyond was a nightmarish blend of operating theatre and torture dungeon, all gleaming metal surfaces and ominous-looking devices. In the center stood Xalox, its red eyes glinting with sadistic anticipation. "Secure the human to the table," it ordered, gesturing with a tentacle, "and prepare the injectors." I struggled as the guards manhandled me onto a cold slab, but in my weakened state, it was like fighting a tidal wave. They snapped metal restraints around my wrists and ankles, then stepped back as Xalox loomed over me. "Your feeble attempts at deception have only delayed the inevitable," it said, picking up a wicked-looking syringe filled with glowing green liquid. "This compound will break down your mental barriers and extract the truth piece by piece. It will be unpleasant." I swallowed hard, fear rising in my throat like bile. I knew what that stuff could do, had seen the vids of captured humans reduced to babbling wrecks, their minds shattered beyond repair. But I couldn't give in, not now. Too much depended on me. Xalox jabbed the needle into my neck, and instantly white-hot agony ripped through my veins. I screamed until my throat was raw, my body convulsing against the restraints. It felt like my brain was being flayed, layer by layer, every memory and thought laid bare. "Where are your hidden bases?" Xalox demanded, its voice cutting through the haze of pain. "What is the true strength of your fleet?" I gritted my teeth, focusing on the lies I had so carefully crafted. "Dozens of planets," I gasped out. "Hundreds of ships, all cloaked, waiting to strike." Xalox snarled in frustration, increasing the dose. The agony intensified, and I could feel my grip on reality starting to slip. Memories flashed before my eyes, my childhood on Earth, my training at the academy, the faces of my fallen comrades. They had given their lives to protect our people, our way of life. I couldn't fail them now. With a supreme effort of will, I wrenched my mind back from the brink and latched onto the false narrative like a lifeline. "The weapon," I mumbled, letting a hint of desperation creep into my voice. "The Nova bomb." Xalox froze, its eyes widening. "What did you say?" I let out a shuddering breath, as if the words were being dragged out of me. "New weapon, still in development, harnessing the power of a supernova, wipes out everything within a dozen light years. No defense." The heptapod leaned closer, its tentacles twitching with barely suppressed excitement. "Where is this weapon located? How close is it to completion?" I shook my head weakly, mustering a final defiant glare. "Go to hell, I won't betray my people." Then I let my eyes roll back in my head and went limp, feigning unconsciousness. Xalox let out a hiss of frustration, but I could practically hear the gears turning in its mind. The seed had been planted. "Take this human back to its cell," Xalox snapped to the guards. "I must inform the High Command of this development immediately. If the humans truly possess such a weapon, we must act swiftly to neutralize the threat." As the guards unfastened my restraints and hauled me up, I fought to keep a triumphant smile from spreading across my face. The heptapods had taken the bait. Now all I could do was pray that my fellow soldiers would find me before the aliens realized they'd been duped. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and I had just rolled the dice. Captain Mike Ghost Nolan crept through the dimly lit corridors of the heptapod mothership, his heart pounding in his ears. The advanced stealth suit he wore made him little more than a shimmer in the air, but he knew that one wrong move could give away his position. Behind him, the rest of the Special Forces team moved like ghosts, their footsteps barely a whisper on the metal deck plates. They had one mission: rescue Sergeant John Reaper, Scorer, Nolan's best friend and brother-in-arms. When intel had come in that Scorer had been captured during the raid on Xandar Prime, Nolan had volunteered to lead the rescue op without hesitation. He'd be damned if he'd leave his buddy in the clutches of these tentacled bastards. The team reached a junction, and Nolan held up a fist signaling them to halt. He consulted the schematics on his heads-up display, transmitted by their AI before the mission. Left led to the hangar bays, right to the crew quarters. Straight ahead, the interrogation block. "Rogue Titan, cover our 6, Nolan whispered into his comm. "Spectre, Cobra with me, let's get our boy back." Acknowledgement lights winked on his HUD, and they moved out, weapons at the ready. The heptapod security protocols were tough, but the team had trained for this. They'd studied every scrap of intel on the enemy's habits and procedures, looking for weaknesses to exploit. As they neared the interrogation area, a pair of heptapod guards came into view, their slug throwers held loosely in their tentacles. Nolan cursed silently. Their stealth suits could fool sensors and cameras, but they weren't invisible to the naked eye at close range. He gestured to Spectre and Cobra, who nodded and peeled off to the sides, flanking the guards. In a blur of motion, they struck, Spectre's monomolecular blade slicing through the first guard's throat, while Cobra's silenced pulse rifle drilled a hole through the second's eye stalk. The heptapods crumpled to the deck, their weapons clattering uselessly beside them. Nolan stepped over the bodies and approached the heavy blast door to the interrogation chamber. He placed a breaching charge, then stood back and nodded to his team. They stacked up on either side, weapons trained on the door. The charge detonated with a muffled whump, and the door blew inward, smoke billowing from the breach. Nolan was through in a heartbeat, his rifle sweeping the room for targets, but what he saw made his blood run cold. There, strapped to a metal table, was Scorer. His face was a mess of bruises and lacerations, his eyes swollen shut. Blood pooled beneath him, dripping from countless wounds. For a terrifying moment, Nolan thought he was too late. Then Scorer stirred, letting out a weak groan. Relief flooded through Nolan as he rushed to his friend's side, his team securing the perimeter. John, it's me, Mike. We're getting you out of here, buddy. Just hang on." Scorer eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with pain. "Mike," he rasped, his voice barely above a whisper. "The Nova bomb told them it was a lie." Nolan's heart clenched as he realized the depths of his friend's sacrifice. Scorer had held out against the heptapod's torture, feeding them false information to buy time for the rescue. He'd endured unimaginable agony to protect Earth's secrets. "You did good, John," Nolan said softly, cutting through the restraints with his blade. "Real good. Now let's get you home." He hoisted Scorer over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, ignoring the blood soaking into his suit. The rest of the team fell in around them, ready to fight their way back to the waiting ship. As they retraced their steps through the corridors, alarms began to blare, the mothership's lighting shifting to a pulsing red. The heptapods had discovered the breach. "Double time it, people," Nolan barked, his grip tightening on Scorer's limp form. "We're going to have company real soon." No sooner had he spoken than a squad of heptapod soldiers rounded the corner ahead, their slug throwers spitting death. The team dove for cover, returning fire with their pulse rifles. Nolan set Scorer down behind a support pillar and joined the fray, his weapon bucking in his hands as he sent a hail of plasma bolts tearing into the enemy ranks. The firefight was brutal and bloody, the air thick with smoke and the stench of charred flesh. But the human soldiers were the best of the best, their reflexes and aim honed by years of training and combat. One by one, the heptapods fell, until the corridor was littered with their twitching corpses. Nolan scooped up Scorer again, and the team raced onward, fighting through wave after wave of enemy reinforcements. They reached the hangar bay just as their ship swooped in, its ramp lowering to receive them. As they stumbled aboard, pulse fire pinging off the hull, Nolan allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had done the impossible, striking at the heart of the enemy and rescuing one of their own. But even as the ship blasted free of the mothership and streaked towards friendly space, he knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over, and Earth would need every soldier, every weapon, every scrap of courage and determination to prevail. But for now he let himself breathe, the weight of his wounded friend heavy in his arms, They were alive and they were going home. For a soldier, that was enough. The human ship shuddered as it punched through the heptapod blockade, its engines straining to maintain the breakneck pace. In the medical bay, sapped Nolan stood watch over Sergeant Scorer, his battered form floating in a regeneration tank. The medics had assured him that Scorer would pull through, but the sight of his friend so broken still made Nolan's gut churn with rage. On the bridge, the crew worked frantically to plot a course back to Earth, their fingers flying over the consoles. They had done the impossible, rescuing Scorer from the heart of the enemy stronghold, but they all knew the fight was far from over. Light years away in the grand chamber of the Heptapod High Command, Zalok stood before the assembled warlords, his head bowed in deference. "My lords," he intoned, "the human has revealed a grave threat to our conquest. They possess a weapon of unimaginable power, capable of annihilating our fleets in a single blow." Murmurs of disbelief and anger rippled through the gathered heptapods. One of the warlords, an ancient creature with a scarred carapace, slammed his tentacle against the floor. "Impossible!" he bellowed. "No human technology could pose such a danger to our superior might." Zalox raised his head, his eyes glinting with conviction. "I have seen into the human's mind, my lord. The Nova bomb is real, and it is nearly complete. We must act swiftly to eliminate this threat, or all our victories will be for naught." The High Command erupted into a frenzy of debate, each warlord clamoring to be heard over the others. Finally, the supreme leader, a massive heptapod with an ornate headdress, raised a tentacle for silence. "Enough!" it roared, its voice echoing through the chamber. "We will not cower before these pathetic humans and their trickery. Zalox, you will take command of our grand fleet and hunt down this so-called superweapon. Burn their hidden bases, shatter their ships, and bring me the Nova bomb intact. We shall turn their own creation against them and secure our dominion over the galaxy." Zalox bowed deeply, a triumphant smile playing across his lipless mouth. "As you command, my liege." As the heptapod fleet mustered, the largest armada ever assembled in their history, Zalox stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the endless ranks of ships fall into formation. The false coordinates extracted from Sergeant and Scorer mind danced in his thoughts, taunting him with the promise of glory. He would find this human weapon and crush it beneath his tentacles, along with any hope of resistance. The galaxy would tremble before the might of the heptapod empire, and all would kneel before his master. But even as the fleet surged forward, racing towards the distant star systems where Scorer had placed Earth's fictional bases, a sense of unease crept into Zalox's mind. The human had been so sure, so defiant in the face of unrelenting agony. Could it be possible that he had been deceived? He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the thrill of the impending conquest. The humans were clever, but they were no match for the power of the heptapod war machine. Light years away, hidden in the depths of Earth's most heavily guarded bunker, Admiral Elena Petrov stood before a holographic display of the galaxy, a fierce grin on her face. The deception had worked better than she could have ever hoped. Sergeant Scorer, false intel, had sent the bulk of the heptapod fleet chasing ghosts, leaving their homeworld vulnerable. The combined human armada, the true strength of Earth's military might, lay poised at the edge of heptapod space, ready to strike. "All ships prepare for fold jump," Petrov commanded, her voice steady with resolve. "Our target is the heptapod homeworld. We end this war today for the sake of all humanity." As the human fleet winked out of existence, crossing the vast distances in the blink of an eye, Petrov allowed herself a moment of solemn reflection. So many had given their lives to make this moment possible. So many sacrifices made in the name of freedom. But none had given more than Sergeant John Reaper Scorer, the hero who had endured hell itself, to light the path to victory. His name would be remembered for generations, an eternal symbol of human courage and indomitable will. The heptapod homeworld hung in space, a mottled orb of sickly green, its defenses caught completely off guard by the sudden appearance of the human armada. The heptapods had grown complacent, secure in their supposed superiority, never dreaming that the humans would dare to strike at their very heart. It was a mistake they would not live to regret. The human ships opened fire, a storm of plasma and nuclear fire engulfing the heptapod defense platforms and patrol ships. The few heptapod vessels that managed to launch were quickly overwhelmed, their crews still scrambling to their stations as the human boarding teams stormed their decks. On the surface below, the great heptapod cities burned, the once proud structures crumbling under the relentless bombardment. The human marines, their armor emblazoned with the colors of Earth, poured through the rubble-strewn streets, cutting down any heptapod that dared to resist. In the grand chamber of the High Command, the heptapod leaders huddled in terror, their arrogance and cruelty stripped away in the face of their impending doom. They had underestimated the humans, and now they would pay the price for their folly. As the human forces converged on the chamber, the supreme leader, its ornate headdress now tattered and stained, raised a trembling tentacle in surrender. "Please," it whimpered, its voice thin and reedy, "we yield. We beg for mercy." Admiral Petrov, her uniform stained with the blood of fallen comrades, strode forward, her eyes hard as steel. "Mercy," she spat, "like the mercy you showed to the billions you slaughtered, to the worlds you burned." She leaned in close, her voice a vengeful whisper. "You will have your peace, heptapod, but it will be the peace of the grave." In the end, the heptapod empire, once the scourge of the galaxy, was reduced to ashes and memory. The human armada, triumphant and united, set about the long task of rebuilding what had been lost. And through it all, one name echoed across the stars, a rallying cry for all who cherished freedom and justice. Sergeant John Reaper Scorer, the hero of humanity, the man who had stared into the abyss and brought back the light. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.